Down in
YouTube's
five,
just a
four.
bonus.
There you go.
I'm John Richards. I am here with my co-host, and I believe she's married to me as well, which is kind of crazy. Amy,
Still.
hi, Dr. Amy, still married, even after all the podcasts and stuff. We were listing off the things last night, actually, when we were laying in bed. Well, I don't know how this started. I said, I'm your husband, so I'm coming to bed or something. And then I said, oh, yeah, I'm your business partner and your co-host, your podcast, and father of your children. And
You were talking about something that was not sexy time. And we were getting in bed and you were in your underwear. And I was like,
that is sexy.
I was
Sorry.
like,
Yeah.
dude, can you finish talking about that before you get into bed? And choose the relationship
what
you
it
want to
was.
have right now.
Right.
Somewhere in the spouse lover area, but not in like,
Yeah, you don't want to sex
not
with your business partner, most
partner,
likely. Yeah.
not parenting partner, not
no.
house manager. Yeah.
Yeah.
Something like that. Anyway, made us laugh.
That's how our night ended. And we have a very we actually have a very busy time. We just got back from our retreat. So a big thank you to everybody who attended the Doctor and the DJ retreat. I learned a lot. I had a really good time. Shout out to all the participants and our friend Jen Wood, who joined us for the podcast as well. If you missed that, make sure you're listening and download the podcast. We do this live on YouTube as well, which we're doing right now. And we're doing another retreat as well. We're not announcing that right now. No, Amy, we're
not announcing,
It's a big one though.
but we are teasing you with it.
Nice. In the radio world, we call this a front sell. Front selling for you to stay tuned to hear about our retreat, which is going to be, can I say it's in not the location, but the idea of the location
Yes.
of another country. We are leaving the United States for this one. Very excited
Yes.
about it.
And we're shooting for summer 2024, end of summer. Get out of the smoke
Smoke, fire. We're going somewhere where hopefully
Pacific
that's not
Northwest.
happening, which is getting harder to do, but we're going to do that. And we also, if you're tuning in live right now, and it's not yet Sunday, November 12th, we have Death and Music coming up. Amy and I will be hosting. An amazing lineup is happening this year at the Moore Theater, where we're being joined by all of our friends. It's family. It's going to be family that night, including Shayna Shepherd, who was just a guest on the show the other day. We booked her live for Death and Music on this show, and we have Jimmy James and Riz Rollins is going to be performing. Toma Nakayama will be playing guitar. There is talk that Sarah Cahoon may be joining now, Amy. I just got an
nice.
email today about that. So we're adding to the bill as we go.
We've
so
got Mike McCready.
Yep. And other it's just family here in Seattle, and they're all going to be at the Moore Theater, where I saw Pixies for the very first time. It was the first show I ever saw in Seattle. Was at the Moore Theater. Saw Pixies. Couldn't believe there were all those people there.
What were they touring? What album was that?
God, that would have been. We may have to ask our guest today. He's a fellow Pixies expert. I think it was '89. So Surfer Rosa, I want to say. No, Doolittle. '89. Doolittle. I think it was Doolittle. But it was a very good show, and it kind of was life changing for me to come to Seattle, visit my brother, and go see that show. So that's happening on Sunday. Anything else?
Death and Music is happening on Sunday, not the Pixies.
No, Pixies
Yeah.
not happening on Sunday.
I think that's it. I'm very excited about our guest today.
Well, it ties into actually, anything we're talking about pretty much ties into our first guest today. Our first guest. You're our only guest, by the way, today. Our first guest today.
Forgot to tell you.
We're going to bring people back from your past. We want to introduce our friend, Nabil Ayers, who's joining us from Los Angeles today. His book is just amazing. If you have not read it, it is one of my favorites, My Life in the Sunshine. And I have so many things I want to talk about it, but it's also interesting to read a book from a friend. We've known Nabil for separately. We both met him. We were trying to figure out when we first met Nabil years ago, but I couldn't figure it out. It's got to be at Sonic Boom Records. It's got to be when I met Nabil. It's got to be. But it could have been at a show, and it could have been 13 other things. But to read a book from a person you've known so long and learn so much more about him is pretty cool. We should all have a book. We should all have a book, hand it to our friends, be like, here you go. Just like throw it on the table. If you still want to be friends, let me know.
Yeah. No, I met Nabil backstage at a show he was the drummer at. And I think it was Alien Crime Syndicate. I think that was the band he was playing in. Anyway, Nabil, Are you around? Where are you?
There he is.
I think I'm here. Am I
There
alive?
you
Yeah, there you
are.
go.
Yay!
There's our
All
friend.
right. It's funny to sit hiding behind the curtain, hearing you say things. And
Well,
nice
we
to
were
be here. Thanks for
well, we
having
were
me.
just talking about the show we have coming up on Sunday and how you lived here and for years and we're in the music world. Clearly, it is family here. It really, I was struck by a lot of things in your book, but when you talked about how you came to Seattle and just immediately were in the music scene and immediately at the record store and playing in bands and getting to know people, that was my experience as well. As soon as I decided I wanted to be in the music world, I was in it. And I don't know if that's the case in most cities, but I sure feel like it was and is here.
Yeah, we were pretty spoiled, I think. And I think, I was in bands then and I toured a lot. So I think I realized that it wasn't like that every place else. But I think a lot of people in Seattle assumed it was. And maybe I appreciated it even more because I knew it wasn't, if that makes sense. But it's always
Yeah.
been a very special place. Yeah.
Well, Nabil, you are a very busy man, so I appreciate you taking some time. You've always
Happy
been.
to be here.
You've always, in reading your book, I felt I felt inspired as to someone who does a lot of different things as well. And it was, and I know that about you, but it was really fun to read about it. But I just visited you not too long ago in the New
Yeah.
York offices and got to see you in charge of all those people over at Beggars. That was. That was pretty exciting. I gotta say, as a kid who grew up on the 4AD record label, I was excited just to be there, let
I still
alone
get
know the
excited to be
guy.
there. It's pretty crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're the president of Baker's Group over there. You're clearly a writer as well. You've written your memoir. I'm just blown away that you are also. It's like you're back in the band touring with this with your book tour,
That's exactly
right?
how I would put it. I figured out a way at 51 years old to be in a band without drums and without other dudes, and it's awesome.
That's probably a lot easier tour, I would think, than the bands or the dudes. Yeah.
But also, sometimes less fun. It's quiet at times.
How has that part of it, just jumping ahead, how is the tour part of it? Because we know the book part, we read the book, we're familiar with the story now, but I'm just jumping ahead a little bit. What's the speaking tour been like? I've read some of your emails that are really interesting, how it's different when you talk at a college and it's different to a bookstore,
right.
but what's been your experience?
It's really fun. I mean, I really have the book's been out for almost a year and a half, and I'm still doing stuff. I've done about 70 events, and a lot of it is because it's fun and I like doing it, and it's promotion, air quotes. Can you see that? But there's this element. I mean, so much of the book is about family that I sort of was looking for and didn't know, and ultimately did connect with in the book, which is great. And as a result of the book, I've connected with a lot of new people. And something I found is, sometimes I'll get Facebook messages from new people or Instagram DMs, or there's lots of different ways people get in touch. But the best way is when I show up somewhere and someone is there and says, "Hey, I'm your cousin." And that has happened multiple times. And so that's why, to me, it's like, well, I haven't been to Cleveland yet. I haven't been to Detroit yet. And I go to those places and it happens in Cleveland. It didn't happen in Detroit, but it's still really like a lot of it is like this real time keeping it going thing where it feels like as long as I keep pushing, things
Wow.
keep happening. It's really fun.
And you did meet up with Karen from the book. Can you, for people who
Yes.
haven't read it, really quick, can you say who Karen is?
Yeah,
You do a better job than
really
I
short
can.
Version is, I'm trying to think. I mean, my father is the jazz musician Roy Ayers. I've never known him. We've met a few times, but really just not a part of my life. But I got a family tree several years ago that taught me a lot more about his side of the family, black side of the family. My mother's white, my father's black, and I learned a lot about my first enslaved ancestor who lived in Alabama and Tennessee, and I think he was born in 1824. And did some research and found this woman named Karen, who I believe is the descendant of the slave owner. She is white, she lives in Texas, and I emailed her and we became really great friends over email. And we have this really interesting relationship where, she didn't do anything to me and she's being very helpful and knows things from back then. So, but we've never met. We've actually never even spoken. We've only emailed for probably 5 years. And so I did a book event in Austin, and she lives not far from Austin, and she came and we hung out and I interviewed her and I recorded it, and she came to the bar afterwards. I don't know, I think she's 70 years old. Like, it was really great. And we still don't know. I think we're related, actually related. She hasn't done a DNA test. She might, but there's also this element of does it really matter? And neither of us really cares. So it's a really interesting American story to me.
Yeah, and the sister who turns out wasn't your sister, but really is very
It really is your
it's
sister.
inspiring, man. Like
Right.
just your attitude about it, this found family and this journey. But to add that you've gained even past the end of your book, more
Yeah.
family members or blood or not is
Yeah.
really inspiring. Your definition of family is inspiring to me.
It's pretty fun. Yeah, it's a really wild ride that just keeps going, and I love it.
Well, I think that that's how we connect with family or chosen family or friends or community is when we start going into this inquiry of our almost of ourselves, like our personal life and what's going on here and what am I trying to discover about myself or about my relatives, or in your case, your father and your family. And as we start to step into the light, like into the sunshine, sorry, I couldn't resist. As we
I love
start to step into that, and it often happens in middle age. Like it often happens like this isn't happening at 18 years old. 18 years old, we're just still like fucking, I don't know what we're doing, right? But in midlife, we start to ask these bigger questions and life has more meaning for us. But as we go through that process and the more we put ourselves out there, the more we find those people and they connect. I'm thinking specifically when you're writing those New York Times articles and people would call you and be like, hey, I'm your aunt, I'm your cousin, It's
Yeah.
so awesome. And you hadn't even
Yeah, it's really fun. But I
completed
think
the
you're
book.
right about the age thing is a part of it. I think, for any of this to work and happen, first and foremost, I had to be curious and interested in going down all these paths. And like you say, at 18, it never even occurred to me. It would have been maybe easier then because more people were alive or more people would have been younger and had better memories. But at 18, yeah, you don't know what you're doing. I just wanted to work in a record store and go to Pixies concerts or whatever. So it took a while, but yeah, I mean, and I'm lucky in that I got to write a book about it, and that getting out there has helped more people find me. So it's sort of this two-way thing that's happening.
Yeah, and I can't ignore what Amy has in front of her. Should we just jump to that? What was shocking in your book? We already knew you in Seattle. So Amy is holding up for our podcast listeners. She's holding up a East Side high school yearbook from Salt Lake City. Now, we've all known each other for decades. I met you. Well, we moved. I didn't know this. I mean, we may have talked about it in the past, but we both moved to Seattle at the same time, summer of '93. You and I both moved to Seattle.
Right.
Turns
right. I
out.
was in Tacoma in college, so
Yeah.
in the area. But yeah,
Yep.
summer '93.
Yeah, but you officially came out, and I was in Spokane, which is kind of in the area. And same reasons, or a lot of the same reasons. I saw
Right.
for
Going
me
to
it
shows at
was
the Moore.
screaming. I saw Screaming
Right.
Trees and Love Battery at the Met in Spokane. Was going to 4,000 Holes and buying records, and
Yep.
my brother lived over here, and I had to get here. And then when I was reading, I was like, oh yeah, it's the same summer, probably within weeks of each other.
Wild.
And we both found our way here. And so we all, and Amy and I met you separately and then know each other through the years. But then Amy's reading your book and Salt Lake City comes up, where Amy is from.
Yeah, I am from Salt Lake City, born and raised, and I went to East High.
Just like Bill.
And you're talking about all this stuff about East High. You're talking about the ground level lockers and the hidden
Right,
swimming
right.
pool, and I'm like, what the?
You knew all that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah.
You knew about the pool.
Yes, because I was in dance company, and our dance company practice space was apparently next to the swimming pool, and behind a
Right,
wall
right.
there was where the swimming pool was, and the locker rooms were the old locker rooms to the swimming pool. And I was on the diving team at East. So we had to travel to a different swimming pool because East
Yep.
didn't have their swimming pool
I
anymore.
remember that.
So
So
how-
we had
I
to
was
travel to
there,
the
but
South High School swimming
you
pool.
did go to South. That's interesting. I thought South closed. It's getting
So
deep.
what's the difference?
I know.
How many years, really quick, how many years are between you then? You were not, you've graduated the year before
I
she
graduated
started.
in 89.
Yeah, and I started in fall of '89. So you and I just missed each other, but
However,
Oh,
my
okay, so we were never
siblings,
there at the same time, right? Okay.
3 of my siblings were in high school with you.
Oh, whoa. What is her names?
Yeah. So actually, this is kind of
Is there
personal,
a Sherry
and
Lindsay? Did I just make that up, or is that a person?
that's my sister, and she passed away. No, and she
Oh,
passed
that's
away,
sad.
and I was actually thinking this. I was
Maybe you
like,
knew her.
Nabil went to
That's what
school with my
Was she
sister
my
who passed
year?
away. Yeah.
music,
think-
big music fan, like
I
Sherry Lindsay, that's my sister.
shorter than me.
Yeah.
Like
Oh
Yeah,
my
she's
God.
short. She was like 5'2".
I totally remember her. We weren't good friends, but we like were in the same sort of friend group. And I remember one specific trip where a bunch of us went to a friend's cabin because kids in Salt Lake had those. It was in Heber or like out like past
Yeah,
Park
Heber.
City, way out in Heber, and it was just like 10 of us went up there and drank. And I remember riding snowmobiles in crazy like big silver like almost hazmat suits. And it was just like a bunch of like 16, 17-year-olds doing that. And Sherry was one of them. In fact, we might have been on the same snowmobile.
Oh
that's
my
why I remember
God.
that, because it was
Yeah.
like pairs of people on it. Oh, wow.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to hear that. I didn't.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
So that's interesting because I was looking through this and I was doing the math in the shower this morning. I was like, wait a second. I think it was Sherry's year. Holy shit.
Oh,
Yeah.
and that name, I mean, I wouldn't have.
yeah, you pulled that right
I
out.
had 30 plus years later. Oh, my God.
Wow.
Yeah. So I think she actually was a year ahead of you. I think she graduated 1 year ahead of you, but that makes sense. Like the story about Heber, because, yeah. So I have so many things to say right now. I'm trying to have my brain catch up to my mouth, or my mouth catch up to
See,
my brain.
Nabil, wherever you go, this is now your thing. This is
I mean, I love it. This is, yeah.
Yeah. So
This feeds right into the more you do things, the more you
Yeah.
learn, and the more people pop up. It's great.
100%.
my other sister, Becky, would have been just younger than you. So Sherry was a
Okay.
year older than Becky. So you were right, like the year in between those.
What was
two.
Greg?
Greg may have graduated
Yeah.
before you started.
She has 13 siblings, so the odds of it.
Salt Lake City.
Yeah, Salt Lake City.
But East High School, so specifically East High School, had a lot of like upper middle class families up on the East Bench, and that's where my family lived. And then we had like upper middle class in the Avs,
Yeah,
and so those
up
were
there,
all
yeah.
in the Avenues, and all those families, and a lot of those families, and a lot of them Mormon, had these giant ranches, like giant ranch cabin places in
Right.
Heber. For
Yeah.
like you were mentioning, and I spent plenty of time drinking in Heber myself with with
It's
whatever.
so far away, but it felt like no
Someone
big deal.
had the keys, like like someone had some older sibling in college had the keys
Yeah.
and got their younger siblings and their friends.
And then once you're in
up there.
Heber was only like 45 minutes from the Wyoming border. So there was lots of going to buy, because Salt Lake had, as Bobby had liquor laws where like you could only have 3.2% beer, but
That's
in
right.
Wyoming you could get anything. So kids would drive to
Well,
Wyoming.
and in
get
Wyoming
beer,
you could
come
be
back.
19 and you could
Oh,
go
was it
just
night- really?
Yeah, and so you could just go right over the border, and there was a very specific place everyone went. And I remember going there and going in the walk-in cooler and just like picking up the beer. And I don't know, I was like, what, 16 or some shit? Like,
It was Mickey's Big Mouths was the beer that
Oh,
with, like,
yeah,
green
yeah.
stubby bottles with big mouths on them. And the thing kids would always say like, "Oh, I was at this crazy party. I drank 14 beers." And you're like, "Really?" Be like, "Well, 7 Wyoming beers." That was like
so you all, yeah, just for people who are just now
yeah,
listening.
people are just like, "What is this podcast?"
that-
I thought we were talking about music
again,
and
every-
race
everyone,
and identity.
everyone here has known each other for over 20 years
Yeah.
in Seattle. And it just came up from your book that you attended the same high school, and our old friend Nabil apparently was hanging out, or at least knew Sherry, your sister, and we're learning this later. And I'd just like to tell you that's the magic of Nabil's book, because us talking about it even has created that atmosphere. Your view of Salt Lake, I thought was really nice. I was expecting something else. I was just being, oh, okay, here we
You
go.
listen to me.
Well, that and yeah, and a person of color being in Salt Lake City and being someone who's been to Salt Lake City. I'm like, oh, here it comes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm already in Seattle, which you mentioned as well. Very, very white city, but Salt Lake is a white city. And
Yeah.
I really, I don't know if I have a question. I just really appreciated how you talked about it. I felt like I learned a lot more of at least your experience of Salt Lake City. What's your view of it
Yeah.
now? I mean, it's in the book, but
It was interesting. I mean, I was 10. I was born in New York City, lived, single mother, young. My mother's white, had me when she was 22. My father was never even meant to be in the picture, so there wasn't a divorce. He never left us. It was just me and my mother. That was the
yeah,
plan. Mixed race kid, lived in New York, Amherst, Massachusetts, Cambridge for a little while. All these like sort of very diverse, hippie, low income communities where like I was just totally a normal kid, which was great. And then my mother got her MBA at UMass, and we moved back to New York. And then I did fifth grade in Greenwich Village at Little Red Schoolhouse, like this famous, super
yeah.
cool liberal school, and sixth grade at Wasatch Elementary in Salt Lake City, Utah, because my mother got a job. She worked for American Express in New York. They moved a lot of the company to Salt Lake, and we decided to go. And the idea was kind of, we'll try it out. And I just remember thinking it was so far away. We went to visit to check it out first, and saw Journey on the Escape tour at
Yeah.
the Salt Palace on that trip, which did seal part of it for me. It was like, wow, I thought I would be further from music, but we just walked across the street from our hotel and saw this show. Like that was definitely part of it for me, like feeling that actually I had better access in New York where things sold out or were 21 and over or just hard to get into. So we tried it, and it was just lots of like never felt racist to me. It was more like kids asking if they could touch my afro. I used to have one. It was like pretty big. And or why my father wasn't there, or why I had a weird name, all those kinds of questions that didn't feel like kids were being mean or making fun. It just felt like they're like, whoa, who is this person, and we need to ask these questions because we've never been around someone like this. And at least I got that, so I wasn't super defensive. I was more like, I already knew what it felt like to be a normal kid, so it was weird to suddenly have these questions. And I just kind of like, I played drums already. I had a big record collection. We had MTV. I just like leaned into that and invited kids over all the time and tried to start a band and just like blended into the degree that I could. But there's a lot of stuff in the book that's still like, and that's what, when you do this when you're later, write about it and think about your life, like, I was just thinking about how nothing really bad ever happened in Salt Lake, but I spent so much time and energy waiting for it to, if that makes sense. I mean, the stuff I talk about in the book is like, I was popular and went to parties and had fun and like went to all the proms and everything, and always with white girls because that's what there are in Salt Lake, or that's what there were then. And so I would go to pick up my date, and every time I would get this real deep like fear, like what's going to happen? I'm going to get to the door, I'm going to meet her parents, and the mother is going to look at me and say, I think my daughter's sick right now. Or the little brother is going to yell like, who's this guy? He's black. Like these are real things that went through my head every single time that just took tons of energy. And part of me is like, maybe I didn't need to be that careful and didn't need to ever think about it because it was fine. And then the other part of me is like, it's good because maybe I prevented lots of things from happening that I never knew about. So it's just, it's interesting to look at years later and just wonder what might have been different.
And as I read in the book, it gave you an escape from your father,
Right.
and how you talked about, being in Salt Lake. You didn't think you're not going to run into him. I'm sure the name Ayers in Salt Lake is different than in New York. Just I'm guessing. That's just a guess, but like not as many people would probably know who that means. I'm just guessing, but guessing that
No,
too.
yeah, in the
They
80s in Salt
didn't.
Lake, he didn't exist, which
Right.
wasn't, and I wasn't trying to get away from him, but in New
Right.
York, we would literally run into him sometimes, which was just weird. It was always awkward because, I mean, one of those times I honestly didn't know who he was. My uncle and I were standing there talking to
Yeah.
my father, and he's asking me questions, and I was like, who's this guy, and why does he know things about me? Like, that would happen. So yeah, moving to Salt Lake just made that stop. I just never thought about it because he didn't exist.
You talk about later that you, the way you talked about him changed too. And I found that interesting that, my parents divorced. So I had an answer. And that's a pretty typical
Yeah.
answer. In the early day, like when my parents first divorced, it still was weird that my parents divorced, but
Yeah, yeah.
I had an answer, and I see why you would just answer that. But talk about how, you came to it, in college, you started to talk about it differently, right?
Yeah, yeah. When we moved, I mean, yeah. So my parents were never divorced because they were never married, and it was sort of by design. My mother
Yeah.
wanted to have a kid with my father, and that's it. But by the time when we moved to Salt Lake, that was just like I was like, why would I want to explain this to anyone here? People are not going to understand. And it's also just like by telling the truth, I would have been inviting a much longer conversation as a 10-year-old that I really didn't feel like having. Now I love having it. I've written 320 pages about it, but as a 10-year-old, like you just want to whatever, go play or do what you're doing. You don't want to talk. You don't want a longer version of that conversation. So I started telling kids I was divorced or that my mother was divorced when they asked, and that I just like it didn't feel good, but it did end the conversation, and I liked that, and that was the goal. People usually didn't pry beyond that, so that would end it. But eventually, in college, when I was like, I mean, I went to college when I was 17, but yeah, getting old enough, and also like around new people and new friends, and sort of starting a new life in a way, I just realized like my mother did such an incredible job raising me, and it was never a weakness that my father wasn't in our life. And so it felt really like I was discrediting her by saying we were divorced. It felt like something was wrong or something was broken. Not that that's what divorce always means, but it just felt like that when it felt really dishonest because it was. And so I just started telling people the truth. And for a long time, it was a much longer conversation than I ever wanted to have. But I did. And now it's actually easier.
Yeah. Well, now you can just go,
Right
here you go.
Here's my book.
Just
Call me when
seriously,
you're done.
It's easier.
Yeah. Yeah.
No,
Only $26. Venmo.
I find this. I want to go back to Salt Lake for a second because few things.
Yeah.
In Salt Lake, especially back in the 80s, it's a little more diverse now, but in the 80s, it was pretty much all Mormon. And that's the dominant culture there is Mormonism, right? And most of those people are all white. And if they're not, they're Samoan or Tongan because the Mormons did all this missionary work in Samoa and Tonga. And then a lot of Samoans and Tongans are living in Salt Lake. So that's what you have. But the dominant discourse there is married heterosexual people.
At least on paper. Yeah.
At least on paper. Right. Thank you. Yeah. I mean, I think gay porn is like the highest in Salt Lake. Anyway, it is. So those are the stats. So on paper, and there's this pervasive, but not a bad thing, this sense of charity. I don't know how else to put it. Like people are very kind and charitable and polite as part of their culture and religion because that is their personal ascension into their celestial kingdom, right?
Right.
And so, no, seriously. So people are really fucking nice in Salt Lake.
They are.
Now,
That's true.
what's going on internally and what's going on behind closed doors and all that is a whole other thing that even like as someone who is like a femme identifying person, I like could go into my whole shit, which I won't right now. But, I see that like people are very, very nice and they actually are genuinely nice. They mean
I think
it.
they really are.
They
nice.
mean
And
it.
it's a really nice place, and there's
Yeah.
a lot of things to be nice about and to be happy about. I mean, I remember showing up there for the first time and just thinking like, weird, everyone on the street is saying hello, and it's just like, and coming from New York in the 80s. I mean, yeah.
Yeah. And then
Yeah.
and so it makes sense that you'd be like, oh, my parents got divorced because, first of all, divorce is like barely anything someone can even consider back then. Like that was even like, oh, okay.
Right. Yeah. Wow.
But
You're
to
going
even
down.
have a more nuanced conversation like was way, way over the head, I think.
Yeah. It's the darkness thing you talk about. I write about this in the book, but I forgot about it because no one ever asks about the Salt Lake stuff. But right when we moved there, I did 5th grade in New York City, which in 1982, like, a dangerous time, a sketchy city, loved it, and then moved to Salt Lake, the safest, most family-friendly place on earth. And one of the first things we had to do at my new school was take hair samples and fingerprints because there are all these murders happening in my neighborhood. And it turned out that, they caught the guy, but he, I think, murdered 4 or 5 kids. And there are all these rules. It's like you can't, if a car gets close and talks to you, you have to run the extra direction. Nobody can walk home from school alone. my mother recently found the hair and fingerprint samples. I have the little packet, and
Oh my
it's just
God.
like, I thought we were in Salt Lake now.
I knew people who were actually kidnapped. Yeah. So this is a thing. Ted Bundy, okay?
Yeah.
Ted Bundy was all over Utah having dinner at
Spokane
our
guy, too.
neighbors, at our neighbor's house. Okay. So there is something to be said about being in a place that is so kind and so polite and so nice, but on the surface, but then they're not actually dealing with so many things below the surface.
Another great East High alum, Elizabeth Smart.
That's right. That's right.
Kidnap victim. Great.
Kidnap
great
victim.
Kidnap story. Crazy story. Yeah.
My friend was kidnapped and she got away. She like got out of the car while it was moving and broke her arm.
It was getting
and
very
like
dark,
yeah.
very Salt Lake dark right
No,
now.
but this is the weird shit, right? Like I actually
weird.
think
Yeah.
the more that you bring things to the surface, then you can actually see them and deal with them. And I think the more you push them down, you get fucking kidnappers and you know.
It feels good to laugh.
Yeah, I mean, and I mean that because you don't actually have street smarts. You're just kind of like, oh yeah, cool, get in your car,
yeah.
whatever.
Right.
Then y'all moved to Seattle. Good work.
We did. Then we moved to Seattle.
Nothing dark or serial killy about this place. It's totally fine up here. It's fine. I want to mention your band names. Motion
Oh, you're starting
sickness.
from the beginning.
I'd like to start with motion sickness, and then the other one. Was it SFW? Am I getting that right?
Yes.
Oh God, what did it stand for
Did
now?
you mean Spontaneous Funk Whorehouse? Is that what you're
Yes,
saying?
Spontaneous Funk Whorehouse. Yes. There is no better question, by the way, when you're interviewing bands than past band names. But you actually lay them all out in your book, and it makes me so happy.
It was sort of hard and it was sort of easy. It was just like, what a great way to just like put it all out
But
there.
the Whorehouse band, you did all right, man, for a early band. You were,
For
selling
like
stuff.
19-year-olds in Tacoma.
That's what I'm saying. I was like, wow, that's actually, you think that story's going somewhere else too. Like, well, that didn't work out. You're like, no, we sold our first run and we played in front of so-and-so and KGRG
For
played
the
us.
Cherry Poppin' Daddies. all
Yeah, man, I may have seen you. I watched those bands you were talking about. I was
Right.
kind of shocked at the music part of it. And as you come up here to Seattle, I'd like to jump to that too, just because that's where we met. And it was, again, I'm sure you've heard this from some of your Seattle friends. It was just really, it was nice to see all Jason Hughes' name in there and Matt Vaughn and mutual friends and Steph and other people who helped you
Right.
along the way and see your perspective. Because I know they're good humans, but I loved hearing how you talked about them in such I don't know, your narrative about them was really nice. It was good to read.
That's it again. The like sort of decades later, you realize how important people were at the time. It's hard to know when it's happening, but really, I mean, the big one for me was Steph Fairweather, who I was an intern at Polygram, which at the time was like a big major label, and there's this moment where she basically told me like, you say your name too softly when you introduce yourself to people. Say it like you mean it, and say it 3 times. And I totally started doing that, and I totally remember that. That was a huge life lesson.
Yeah. Yeah. And meeting Matt and seeing a guy that young own a record store.
I know.
I forget that. I know Matt, but
He's more into it than ever. It's
yeah, I
amazing.
know him now. I mean, I've known him then, but like, I think of Matt as now, you know how it goes. You think of him now, and we're like a couple miles from Easy
Right.
Street Records for anyone outside of Seattle. Go there. It's a great record store. And thinking of you and Jason Hughes opening at that age, and that's when I met you. Because I knew Jason.
Yeah.
So you talk about Jason and the record store and how that together you built that. You probably wouldn't without Jason. And you
Right.
talked about his radio shows, and I actually took over both his radio shows.
Right.
One at the
crazy.
end. I remember that at the end, he brought me in and I didn't know why he was. And it was eventually just to go to Phil Manning, the program director at the time, and say like, this guy, he actually told him in the office, this guy's your new local host. God, I remember Jason opening Christmas presents from his mom on that show. It was the saddest radio show I've ever done. That dude made more fun of himself than I think anyone I've ever met. He was so self-deprecating. It was socks. It was like, what are you? He goes, I got a bag. It's all the presents from my mom. I go, and you're going to open those on the air? He goes, yeah, they're going to be terrible. So okay, and that's Jason to me. So I owe Jason a lot too.
Yeah. Yeah, bring some personality to the radio.
Oh yeah, he taught me actually a little bit of hosting local shows, and I took over Audio Oasis over on
Yeah,
KCMU,
yeah.
which later was KEXP. But you and Jason opened that record store, and it was, I mean, for people like you talk about, like when you opened the record store, how there was nobody there. I remember eventually going there when people like that was the place you went to with Sonic Boom Records. Can you just tell me about like that's got to be a dream come true, right? When you open that.
Oh, weird. My camera just changed. Yeah, it was crazy. I mean, it's funny because I've talked to a lot of people about it since the book, and the thing that stands out for me that made it work was really the fact that in 1997 in Seattle, when we were 25 years old, Seattle or at least could be a very inexpensive city, and that's the only way it worked. We each had houses with roommates where we paid like $350 a month rent, had like a little credit card debt, but nothing crazy, and that was it. And so we were paying ourselves like $250 every 2 weeks to work at the store. Like it didn't cost that much money to do. I think we opened that store for $30,000, which was like half credit cards, half a loan from his mom. And like, even if it had failed, we would have lost a bunch of money, but we wouldn't have been bankrupt. It wouldn't have been life ruining. So it was like a time when you could do that. And that's a lot harder now, at least certainly in Seattle and a lot of cities.
Yeah, and you continue down that road of that I mentioned earlier in the music business. You spell it out, and it really shows you the path you were on. When you're reading it and you know where you end up at Beggars, it's really interesting to read how much you were learning and sucking up, like just not just with playing music, but you talk a lot about how much enjoyment you got out of the music industry, like being a part of a band's success or being part of I guess I should put it differently. And Amy did this with events, and I do this when I play bands on the radio, but having a little part of the success is what I liked how you talked about. Like talk to people about that. Yeah.
Yeah, well, I mean, now I get asked a lot. I mean, I played in bands for years, and now I run a record label, and I get this sort of like, so how did you pivot from the creative side to the business side? It's like a lot of versions of that question, and to me, it's always like I didn't, and I won't. I've always been on the creative side, starting when I tried to play shows when I was 7 and charged $1 at the door, and the playing music was really fun, and the charging $1 and each of me and my friends making $3 each that day was really fun. Like I always understood that it all works together. Like it's not necessarily that you have to make money during it, but like that can be part of it, and that's not a bad thing. And in high school, would record demos with motion sickness, my high school band, and I was the one who'd be like, cool, we recorded these 3 songs, let's go to Kinko's and draw covers and copy them and dub tapes tonight and sell them at school tomorrow. And that's literally what a record label is. That's it. You record something, you make copies of it, you sell it. So I just always had that instinct and always really got joy out of that part of it too. It wasn't just, I wasn't like the drummer who didn't care about the other stuff. I was the drummer who really cared about the other stuff. And then through record company internship, college radio, just kind of always learned a lot about both sides of the music business, I suppose. So to me, it felt totally natural that, the last band I was in was the Long Winters, which was great and was so much fun. And when that kind of wound down, which was like 2007, 8, started working at 4AD soon after that, and really realized, to me, the Long Winters was maybe 50% playing. And then also I just loved, this is great. I get to go to Europe. It's so fun to talk to all these label people that we meet in the different territories or festival bookers. And then, so once I started at 4AD, the playing part was gone and I missed it, but I realized how much fun it was to work with a bunch of other bands who all kind of had some degree of success. It was aware that something would totally fail. Of course, there are things that didn't do as well as we wanted them to, but it was great because it was like, wow, there's always something going well, and I can always still feel that feeling I had in a band connected to the thing that now I just get paid to do, and I love it, and it's great. So it's still like that, where it's very much like, I'm not playing music, but I still get a good chunk of what I liked about playing music from working in music.
It's all using your creative brain. Entrepreneurial endeavors are being creative.
Right.
Playing music is being creative. Playing in a band, you are solving problems with your creative brain musically. Running a record label, you're solving problems using your creative brain. And I honestly think creatives rule the world, and everybody else, it's just everybody else is just part of the creative. I mean, I mean it, because I think that we are all creative beings. I just think some of us we're more drawn to the arts or more drawn to music, but at the end of the day, solving problems is a creative process.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's funny. I mean, I love the term creative. A lot of people consider themselves creatives, but I feel bad sometimes for people that therefore don't. And I think a lot of the time people are wrong when they're like, well, like I'm not a creative person or whatever. It's like, I think most people actually are, or at least have some element of it, but feel like because whatever, maybe they have three more friends who are painters or something like that, that they
Right.
therefore are not. And I do think it's like, I mean, Chase Jarvis, our common mutual friend, is very
Yeah.
big on all of this. Like, I think it is there for most people. It's about finding it and figuring out a version of it that makes you happy.
Yeah, and part of it you talk about the DNA, but at the same time you talk about these siblings you find and are probably still finding,
Yeah.
who are not making
You're even
music.
finding my siblings.
You're finding these as well. And but also, the way that your mother raised you and supported you and backed whatever it was you were doing, I found a little emotional with my own mother, because she did the same. Single mom who always believed in me when it seemed kind of nuts,
Yeah.
and did you have a feeling then? You write about it, so you have those feelings now. You really can feel your love for your mother and respect, and how much you appreciate how hard she worked and inspired you. Did you have that then? Did it hit at a certain age? How much? I know kids don't necessarily have it. It took me
Yeah.
years. I remember when I did. But when did you start to really see, maybe is the question, your mom for what she
Yeah,
is?
it's hard. I mean, probably not till later, but I do remember I never really gave my mother a hard time, if that makes sense. And it was just me and her, never had money till we moved to Salt Lake. Then we weren't nearly as rich as some of my friends, and that's of course always how you gauge it, but suddenly had enough money to like buy records and buy toys and go out to dinner. So it felt like we were rich all of a sudden in Salt Lake. But when we were even really poor as a kid, I remember thinking sometimes like, which was pretty, I don't know why my young brain did this, but this like, don't get into this with your mother. Leave her alone. She's working really hard and she's doing a really good job. I remember thinking that, probably less so as a teenager, because teenagers are so bratty and you just want everything and you don't understand why. But I think as a younger kid, knowing that and just knowing that like, maybe seeing people where things weren't as good and realizing, no matter how much I want something, like my life is better than that person's. I think it's always, as a kid, it's always about the comparison. And I knew that she was working really hard and that things were good.
You had a really healthy relationship with your uncle as well, and how that comes through in the book too is inspiring. Just you knew you were loved, you knew you were supported, and then I think gave you the space to actually struggle with your father not being in the picture, right?
Right.
Like, because you had the support and you had the ability to sit and think about that.
Right. Yeah. I mean, yeah, the uncle thing is so funny because it's my mother's younger brother who
Oh yeah.
made this incredible album when I was a kid in 1975. And then I reissued that album in 2018 and it kind of did much better than anyone thought it would. And so he made a new album, his second album, that came out in 2020, 45 years later.
Wow.
And then last week in New York, we recorded the third album. That's
No way.
Gonna come out next spring. It's so, I think he's 72, 73. It's so much fun. And this is the person who bought me a drum set when I was 2 years old. So it's really funny when like he's very grateful and always says so, but I'm like, you don't need to thank me. This is like, you literally bought me a drum set when I was 2 years old. Also, a lot of the book stuff stemmed from that reissue thing where that's when I started writing about being a kid in New York. So it's all wrapped up in the same thing. But yeah, he's an amazing figure. And so it is interesting that sort of the way you're posing it is like with him and my mother and then my father kind of being the opposite, but also me still always recognizing that the plan was for him to be the opposite. So he didn't break any
Yeah.
rules or agreements, but still it just got harder as an adult when I really just wanted information and wanted to know about my siblings and about my ancestors and about health history and things. And he gave me a little info, but then really kind of disappeared. So that's when it started to become hard. But that's also when I started really digging into things, and that's why I know so much now. So I'm even thankful for that, if that makes sense.
Have people, I don't, maybe it's people interview you or people in your world, do they take sides? There's sides. Is there like well, your mom, she did the wrong thing, she should have done it, or your dad, he sucks, he should have been, or you, like, why are you so, hey, they told you the agreement and you have to, like, has that been a thing?
All of this, my favorite one is pretty recently. I did a I did a book talk, whatever, in conversation thing at the University of Southern Oklahoma a few weeks ago. And a professor who was great got up, and it was like the Q&A part, and he's like, I just have to say, like, it's almost like emotional. He's like, I just have to say, like, I think your father's a real asshole. I was like, what am I supposed to do? Like, cheer or say thank you or something? It was like, because first of all, it's not a question. It's called not the answer and answer. It's the question and answer.
Right.
But so that happens. But yeah, people are much more sensitive though about my mother. But there are ways that people will say, like, were you ever angry at her for the decisions that she made, or did you ever question that? Those are definitely common questions, and I'm happy to talk about those things. I mean, of course, no matter how you look at it, it's pretty selfish as a 21-year-old to say, I want to get pregnant and have a kid by myself and see what happens. But she was right. So how could I be mad about it? She did a great job.
I mean, you turned out pretty good, man. I can't see her as a bad guy because
right.
You're
Right.
you're
So I get really protective, but the other funny thing that happens is I get protective of my father sometimes too. And that's a really strange family dynamic. I talked to someone last week who's like, my father's alive and still playing music. I just don't know him. And someone was like, so your father was a jazz musician, and I'm like, my father is a jazz musician, and I like get this real like. I can feel it, this assholic quality in my voice. And I'm like, why am I doing this? Why am I on this side of it with him right now? But I'll do that when necessary. And I think it's just a family thing, I guess.
I mean, I'm not going to tell you what you're doing, but my observation is you're defending what is so. You're just defending the story. You're just defending your own history when people try to put it in a box.
Right.
And you're just
and when they're wrong.
There are no boxes.
That's right.
And y'all wrong, and you're just defending what is so, which is what is the magic of the story or what is your own experience. And I think that the more that people bring to light, coming back to the beginning, their stories, more of us can learn about each other, that everything isn't just status quo, and everything isn't just fitting in these like boxes we think they're supposed to fit in, regardless of what your story is. And I actually think it makes us more interesting, and it makes us more connected.
I agree with all of that. Well, very well said. I need to remember that whole response. Great.
It's recorded. You can.
All right.
I'm sure I'm gonna have to ask something. I know you've been asked, but I gotta ask about your dad in this book, though. In my mind, I'm thinking your dad. You don't know how your dad maybe looks at this book, so but I think of him as how he is dealing with you is maybe how he's dealing with the book. Or, I mean, he must get asked.
Has he read the book?
We don't know.
No idea. That's
right?
the weird thing. So he doesn't. Yeah, I mean, I'm still not in touch with him. I haven't heard from him. I wasn't expecting to, and I don't expect to. That's not weird to me. It wasn't the goal, and it wasn't even a guess. So, but I think, he definitely has to know about it. But I mean, I know people who know him, and they haven't told me anything. But it would surprise me if he's read it. But this is all just conjecture. I don't know, but so surely he knows about it. And I don't know. I think in the end he comes out he got away pretty clean in the book and in life. Really.
I thought he did. I thought
it was definitely not meant to be, it's not supposed to be a teardown at all. And the only time I was worried about it was during the several months when it was like announced and there was a pre-order link up and it had like, you could read the basic story, but you couldn't read the book. And so that was the period where I was like, ugh, is he going to find out about this and get mad and assume it's really bad? Like that was when I was worried. But once it came out, I was like, okay, now at least someone can say to him like, yeah, you came out pretty good.
I want to talk about my favorite part of your book.
Oh yeah.
All
I mean, I love the Salt Lake stuff because I was just like, what? No, you know. My favorite part is when you are with your dad's sister at your grandparents' grave. I welled up in tears. I was on my morning walk and I was listening to the audiobook,
Oh.
the Nabil in the ears.
Yeah, that was weird to hear your friend read the book.
It was awesome. What do you mean? It was awesome.
Now I know how
was
people feel.
feeling
The
so proud to know you. That was my favorite moment because I had so much like happiness and grief at the same time in like a sort of empathetic relationship with you at that moment because I was doing the math. My brain just does math all the time, by the way. That's like always doing math. And I was doing math when you were saying the birth years and the death years. And the death year of your grandmother was 85, I believe. And you were born in 72?
72, right?
So I had this like sadness that you didn't meet your grandmother.
Me too. Yeah.
And at the same time, I was feeling so happy that you had found your aunt and were standing there at their
Yeah.
grave.
It was a pretty powerful moment. I'm so glad that, I mean, it took, once I met my aunt, my father's younger sister by 2 years, who like looks like she could be my mother, I hung out with her a couple times in LA. She was just wonderful, so open, told me so many new things I wanted to know that I didn't get from my father. And I think pretty early on, I was like, she was talking a lot about her parents, my grandparents, and I was just like, where they're buried and will you take me there? And she was immediately very open, and so we planned it. And I was just like really nervous the whole day that something was going to go wrong, or that even the whole time around her, I was worried that it's going to seem like I wanted something from her, which I did. But like, what I wanted was to go to the cemetery and meet my grandparents. And she took me there. It's a much longer story than is in the book. It was much more stressful because we were meeting our cousins who are closer to my age for lunch afterwards. And it was really hot out and we couldn't find the grave. And she was getting stressed because she's like, I'm getting older. I've been here so many times. This is really disappointing. And like, we were kind of walking so slowly. And then she's diabetic and the cousin is texting me like, we need to get her some food. How long are you guys going to be? I mean, it's really
God.
like a lot. And I wrote all of this, and of course it ends up being compressed into a much more better thing. But it was just, but once we got there, it was just like everything shut down. It was just me and her literally introducing me to my grandparents. It was incredible. What a crazy, cool experience to have. And she sadly passed away last year, which was so sad, but I'm just so lucky and so glad that I got to spend time with her.
Yeah, you're kind of, I won't say relentless, but just your passion to figure this out it's great, man. I didn't know that about you. You know, I've known you a long time.
That's a good word, I think.
Yeah, and I just felt like I wish all my friends would write a book so I could, like what? Because you ask questions, but just that journey you've been on and especially in the last few years, I am with Amy. Like I've been recommending this book to everyone, but when it's such a great story, and then you get to the last few chapters, and you're just like, wow, you just found everybody. Like his family members, just if you haven't read this, are just everywhere and loving and supportive and take you to the grave, and your view and how you come around to found family and blood or not blood, or even going back to this Karen who's family or people you thought was your sister,
I know, it's a lot.
It's
really funny because there was an original ending that was a fantasy scene. It was me. It was my wife and my wife AJ, who I believe is listening. Shout out to my beautiful wife.
Oh, hi.
Hello. And it was the fantasy scene was me and AJ going to some sort of family reunion and walking around in LA, and the sun is shining and all this stuff. And we get there, and everyone kind of from the book, and even some imagined people, everyone's there, and it's this magical moment at the end. And I loved it. And my editor, who was wonderful to work with, she's like, "Look, it's your book. I know this is an important thing. Will you try something?" And I was like, "What?" And she's like, "Well, why do you have a fantasy scene at the end of the book when it actually all happened and you did it?" And I was like, oh, wow, I hadn't thought of it. So she's like, will you try writing an ending where you just talk about what actually happened? It's more powerful. And she was right, and that's what the ending is now. But it took someone to like tell me that. I think I still didn't realize it even at the time.
Well, I mean, for so long, that side of your family was a fantasy, or
Right.
and
Certainly that half, yeah, completely imaginary. Yeah.
this is just in my own brain, but when I was reading your book or listening to it, I kind of thought about your father as like almost like a tapestry, almost like a tapestry, just kind of in whatever room you were in.
Right.
But behind it were all these people who had been there all along. And you kept saying that, like, they've been here. Like, they had full lives. Like, they were born, they were toddlers, they were people. But how they came to light later in your life and later in their lives, and how much of a kind of a cool, but kind of a mind fuck that is,
Yeah,
like,
totally.
so what are your I mean, do you sit around and try to like go back to the past a lot with them, or like try to figure out, kind of like I was doing with you in Salt Lake? I was like, oh, I was at this place and you were in Heber,
Right,
and we
right.
were, like, do you
Yeah.
try to go backwards and like make connections about where you were? You did a little bit in the book,
A
but
little bit, not too much. I mean, there's not a lot. So much of my father's family is in and from Los Angeles, and I never spent time here as a young person, so there's not a lot of the like, were we in the same room kind of thing. But there are interesting people. I've met now, I think, 3 of the people who play on Everybody Loves the Sunshine on my father's album from 1976, which is wild. And so with 2 of them, I'm like, I was at the show in Amherst in 1979 that you played, and they can be like, oh, I remember that show really well. Here's what we did the night before. Like, that part of it is fascinating to just like, I don't know, there's something about the physical idea of like, we're in the same exact room on this date 40 something years ago. That happens a lot. That happens more and more. Yeah. And it's really fun.
Well, we want to get you out of here, Nabil. I know you're very busy. You're down in LA right now. And
So fun.
I want to say one line that you said that you described exactly how I felt when I heard the Pixies. You said, I didn't possess the vocabulary to describe it. And as someone who's heard it and didn't understand what was happening, like I'd heard all this music, and then exactly how you put it in, and you're like, I can't figure this out. And then how you described Black Francis, Frank Black's lyrics, how they were menacing, but Kim Deal's were, I don't remember what you said, they're more inviting.
Yeah, definitely. Right.
And then what happened to me is I heard this tape. I didn't think anyone had heard it because I was in Spokane, right? And I was downtown, and some busker dude, I'm walking by, and he's singing Gigantic. He's like, what? True story. And I'm walking by, and I just hear a big, big love. I'm like, what the fuck? What the fuck? Like,
We're talking about the same song.
yeah, the same song that's in your book, and it was someone covering it, like you all did, and I don't know what that's the song you cover. I don't even understand.
That's some real synergy going on. Wow.
But I was happy to hear you're of the same age and moved to Seattle at the same time, and Pixies had a similar effect. And
I didn't get to, I think that probably was the Doolittle show that you saw in '89. I didn't get to see them till, and I wonder if you were at the show, '90. So that would have been Bossa Nova for them. It was Jane's Addiction on Ritual, Pixies on Bossa Nova, and Primus opening at the Seattle Arena.
okay, I saw that in Salt Lake.
Oh wow! At the fairgrounds.
At the fairgrounds, yeah.
I was at the
Part 2 of the podcast.
I was at the Lollapalooza you mentioned, though. I was definitely.
I was at that the Enum Claw, the first one.
Yes. Yeah. I broke my toe there. Yeah, I remember it very well. That's when I bought Doc Martens after that. I said, oh, that's why you wear them. Yeah, I couldn't play Frisbee, man. It totally ruined my summer.
So good.
And I have seen the Lemons many times. Clearly, I have known and played and watched Alien Crime Syndicate over the years. I was a big supporter. And of course, the Long Winters, again, another big supporters. No one has ever heckled me more than John Roderick of the Long Winters. I remember one time, lead singer, I was leaving the barbecue y'all played.
That was really fun. Yeah.
She put the show together, and I left at some point because I have to get out of there. You know, it's kind of a KXP,
Well,
me, and this is,
after the long winters played.
well, while you were playing, I had to get the fuck out.
And I
was
put
like,
that show together, but that was not the
Right.
first time I met Nabil.
No, but I'm leaving and I'm on the street and I'm like, I gotta go, you know, before everyone. And I don't want to talk to everyone. I guess, you know, I gotta get out of here.
Yep, I do.
And I hear him from the stage as I'm walking alone, ripping something about me apart. And I'm like, and I put my head down, just shake my head, like, motherfucker, goddamn, John.
Sounds right.
Yeah, that's John.
Sounds
So
right.
he is playing at the Smooch, the Children's
I saw
Hospital
that.
benefit, coming up in December. Some more synergy for us all coming up. So I it's a small world, and I'm glad I know more about your world, Nabil. It's
Thank you. This has really been fun. Thank you for having me.
I know it's
Yeah.
all over the place, but man,
Oh, it's great.
there's yeah. I'm just and he has as someone who's known you well. I'm really proud of you and just everything you've done and the inspiring. I know you're going to inspire other people. I know you have with this book and your life and it's brave to put this down on paper and to take that chance. And I'm just kind of blown away by it. It's just really great.
Thanks. I really appreciate it.
I want to thank you for giving me a new story and a new memory
Yeah.
about my sister.
Oh, wow. I mean, you're welcome. That's really amazing. And I'm so sorry, but also so happy. I remember that really well, and it was really fun. Great night.
Yeah.
Well, we'll be remembering her at the Moore Theater. God, this is just way too much synergy here. It's getting weird. But we're going to be at the Moore on Sunday, actually. That's the first place I ever saw a show, and we're hosting
Wow.
our Death of Music event. And this book is amazing. My Life in the Sunshine, Searching for My Father and Discovering My Family. And I will never listen to your dad's music the same ever again, and maybe not yours as well. Real quick, too. What am I getting excited about from your label? What am I going to deal with? Can you tell me anything, or is it stuff I already know?
I mean, I can't announce anything that hasn't been announced.
Yeah, I
Am gonna-
figured.
I mean,
What are we
Sam-
excited about now? I can't even. What are
I'm
you?
very excited about Sampha right now.
Yeah,
That record just
yeah.
came out a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh God, I'm trying to think. I'm gonna ruin something. I'm gonna get myself in trouble.
I know.
I'm just excited about everything. It's all great.
I went, like I said, I went to their office. It's pretty great, and my friend Elena works over there. It was just a champion of music, and had a really nice time. So thanks for giving me I got a little tour. It was great. So
Yeah, it was fun.
I'm a nerd. I like when you said you were buying the records that had 4AD or Sub Pop. That was same. Go to 4,000 holes and walk up to Bob, the owner, and be like, you got Flying Nun, you got Sub Pop, you got Matador. Was it Matador at the time? I think.
Yeah, probably.
Right. And 4AD was a no brainer. Like
Yeah.
100% of what was on that label I loved. And so I'm just,
So fun.
you've got to be a nerd about it too. You got,
I'm super nerd. It's amazing. I mean, all these Cocteau Twins repressings that are coming out. It's so much fun.
it's their favorite band.
This is my favorite. Okay, we could go
Yeah, we
into
gotta
like
go.
podcast
We're gonna
part
let Nabil
two,
go
part
work.
three. Nabil, thank you.
Thanks,
It's
buddy.
great to see you.
Thank
I'm
you.
in
I hope to
LA
see
a
you guys in
lot.
person. Are
He
you?
tends to be
let's
in New
stay
York
touch.
a lot, so
Yeah.
you know.
We gotta hang out somewhere.
Yeah, we
Have
gotta
you-
hang out.
And real quick, have you talked to Jason Hughes lately at all?
I'm
Has
trying
he
to think.
has he read the book? I'm sure he has. He comes out
Yeah, he
very
has.
well
Yeah.
in the book.
We
By the
talked
way.
a few months ago. We had his birthday. We hung out on his birthday at South by Southwest. That would have been March, but I feel like I've seen him
good.
since then somewhere. Yeah, we
Yeah.
stay in touch. He's
Good.
great.
Well, give him my love if you
will.
see him. I haven't talked to him in a long time. A big thank you to Nabil for taking the time. A big thank you to Ruinous Media for hosting. As always, Patrick, thank you so much. And a big thank you to all of you for listening, subscribing. We have our YouTube channel. You can go to The Doctor and the DJ on Instagram and online, drandthedj.com. We have another retreat planned out, not in California this time.
Not in California. Nabil, where can everybody find you?
Yeah, where do they get Nabil information?
I mean, Nabil Ayers, NabilayErs.com, or I'm at Nabil Ayers on all the things.
Awesome.
Yeah, and get his book, Do Not Wait. And he does sound very good, by the way, on the audiobook. I enjoyed having my friend Nabil around with me. I half read it and I half did the audio. I felt like, I don't know, I just felt like I should do both. It just felt,
Yeah, I've done that. That's pretty fun.
okay, good. I'm not alone on that. All right, thanks to Nabil, and thanks to everybody for listening. And